And might as well apply as many indulgences for the poor souls in purgatory as you possibly can, because if you do, they will pay you in like from heaven when you die. This is a teaching found in a book that bears the seals of approval of the Church, entitled The Unpublished Manuscript on Purgatory, where a nun in purgatory revealed to a nun on earth that when souls pray for others in purgatory and help them get to heaven, when they get to heaven, they pray for those souls when they're in purgatory who help them get to heaven. So you see, what comes around goes around in heaven and purgatory.
Thanks for tuning in to Everything Catholic, and thanks so much for taking a little bit of your time to be here with us. There are only 2 clips in this video that I want to share with you this time, and the first is going to be about 7 minutes long, but it's very good, I can assure you that. Now, without wasting any more time, let's start with this. And it's going to be about Padre Pio. And as you know this already, I love learning about him.
So doing a great work today. His work hasn't ended just because he died. He said in one of his epistles that I will stand at the gates of heaven and waiting until my last spiritual child enters. So consecrate yourself to Saint Padre Pio. Become his spiritual child. Send your guardian angel to him. He asked people to do that to him when he was on earth. Why not stop? Why stop doing it now? You can still send him your angel. And you can still consecrate him and make yourself his child. And he will still wait at the heavenly gates, as he said he would, waiting for you to enter, meaning he will pray that you get there. I recall, as I have in the past, meeting with my mentor in exorcisms, Father Gabriel Amor, who went to St. Padre Pio. He visited him many times. And one time, when he went to Padre Pio, he said, Padre, can you take my spiritual children under your protection so that I may be reassured that none of them will be lost? And Padre Pio looked at him intensely, smiled, and said, Va bene, figliolo, va bene. He said, yes, my son, yes. And then Father Amoth, jokingly, with his humor from Modena, Italy, where he came from, said, okay, Padre Pio, now they will no longer call you Padre Pio, but Grandpa Pio, because I'm their Padre, you're the grandpa. And Padre Pio chuckled. He had a good sense of humor, you know. Sometimes when people laugh, they make jokes. People say, oh, you're taking your religion too lightly. Well, they miss the whole point of the joy of the saints. You know, Jesus tells Louisa to have the house of the resurrections built for priests, patterned after the spirituality of the saint of humor, Saint Philip Neri. He's known as the saint who knew how to smile, tell jokes, and laugh without losing his pace, his stride in holiness. And that's one of the things I think we're missing today. You know, there's a lot of sin, turmoil, confusion, evil, trouble in the world today, I believe more than ever in human history. Well, on a global scale, that is. Not on a concentrated scale, but on a global scale. I mean, concentrated in one area, that is. But globally, we're in the greatest time of all evil, I believe. And I think that because of that, people have forgotten the joy that Mother Teresa of Calcutta emphasized, so much so that she wouldn't allow the nuns to join her community unless they smiled. Yes, that's in fact what she told the nuns. I know this as a matter of fact because I met her twice and I spoke with her nuns. And I even read the only official autobiography on her life from a woman from Britain who lived with her. And I say it's the only official autobiography because Mother Teresa of Calcutta told Catherine Spink, spelled with a K, to publish her biography, and that it would be the official one only after her death. And Catherine Spink respected that. And in it, you'll find these truths, you know. And of course, the difficulty she went through founding the community, I mean, it was really, really difficult. One of the nuns that she began the order with was drowned in a flood in Bangladesh because the sari that she wore around her neck was wrapped around her when she was trying to swim. But she went through the fire, Mother Teresa. And the joy that she wanted to transmit to the poorest of the poor, the abandoned on the streets, especially in Calcutta, could only be communicated by a smile, because she didn't initially know their language, and most of them were not even Catholic. And this is why she wore white and a crucifix right beside her shoulder on her chest, so that the first thing she said they would see and the last thing would be Jesus crucified. Why did she wear white? She tells you why. She said, yes, The clergy wear black because they mourn the death of Christ. And that's in fact what the Pope, who established black as the color for the clergy, stated. We're mourning the death of Christ. Mother Teresa added, rightly so, yes, Christ has died, but without the resurrection, the death of Christ has no value. And she's completely right theologically. The crucifixion is not an end in itself. There's no Easter without a Good Friday. And there's no Good Friday without an Easter. So there's nothing wrong with the clergy wearing white, including the nuns. And I say this because there are people out there that refuse to welcome any clergy unless they're wearing the traditional black, and they walk a certain way, and they talk a certain way, and they bend their head when they pray a certain way, and fold their hands a certain way. This is not how God operates, okay? God said there are many mansions in heaven. He doesn't limit himself to one rite, one external observation, one clothing or garment. Small-minded people do. I'm not putting anyone down. I'm simply telling you that God is bigger than human measurements and human categories. The Eastern Rite has all 7 sacraments, just as the West, and they are no less valid than ours. They do not genuflect, they do not fold their hands like we do, but they do it according to their own right. They do not wear the same colors that we do. So this is how we must grow in the divine will, with an ecumenical Christian outlook like the apostles had. The apostles were not scholastic, they were not patristic, they were both. They were universal. This split between the East and West, patristic, scholastic, Orthodox, Catholic, began in 1054 with the schism. But in the beginning, it wasn't like this. And that's why the new theology, it's called new theology, but it doesn't mean new that we're adding anything to that which has been taught, but we're explicating, as the Article 66 of the Catholic Catechism states, that which has been revealed but not fully understood. So you have the patristic theology that covered the first 1,000 years of theology, the scholastic, which is East Orthodox patristic. Then you have the scholastic, which is Western Latin scholastic, which covered the second 1,000 years. And then you have, in the last 150 or 200 years, what's called this ressourcement theology. And this includes the great theologians of these last times, like Yves Congar and Garrigou de Lagrange, and who was a professor of Pope John Paul II, and also Karol Wojtyła and Joseph Ratzinger, and Urs von Balthasar, and Jacques Danielou, and Henry de Lubac, and the list goes on and on. These were all the people I studied, whose materials I studied, including those of the patristics and scholastics. All of these I mentioned are ressourcement theologians. What do? They combine the first 2,000 years of Greek theology, which is patristic, with the second 1,000 years of scholastic theology, which is Latin, into one synthetic expression of faith, which was the way it was in the beginning. And this is a theological expression of what I think we should all welcome externally when it comes to different ways of dressing, reverencing, or expressing our faith by genuflecting or bowing or folding our hands or clasping our hands or holding them down like the Orthodox do.
Now, I have shared so many clips of Father Iannuzzi with you on this channel, but every now and again people ask questions in the comments that I have covered before. Perhaps it's my fault because I usually release these clips in compilations, so there's no one fixed topic in one particular video. In any case, someone asked this question and I thought, let's revisit the clip for this one.
At the moment of death is the soul snatching, God's soul snatching, because in that moment, everything is revealed to the soul. It's a very august, solemn moment. We can't understand it now because we don't have the demons and the angels vying for our soul right now, which happens at the moment of death. And when they do that, all these internal visions, internal locutions start to happen inside of us that we never experienced in our life. We hear voices. We hear and see interiorly images that we don't see right now. At the moment of disillusionment, in seeing and in experiencing firsthand how much we, the Trinity, love the soul and do love it now, the soul feels so much sorrow that it repents for not having loved us. It recognizes our will as the beginning and completion of its life. And to offer satisfaction, it accepts its death to accomplish one act in our will, because without one act in our will, it cannot enter heaven. And then he adds, with the exception of the most perverted and obstinate, how many are saved at the moment of death by virtue of this entirely loving stratagem of ours, even if this means that they have to endure a long time in purgatory? This is why the moment of death is our daily soul snatching. It is the finding of the human creature who was lost. Okay, now, if a person commits suicide by jumping off a bridge or is under the influence of drugs, which mitigates their deliberation and therefore actions, it doesn't mean they're lost for eternity. Before the Second Vatican Council, I want to make sure I say this right. No, it wasn't before the Second Vatican Council. It was after the Second Vatican Council. A few years thereafter, the Church made a law that reversed its previous law. The previous law was no one who committed suicide could be buried in a Catholic cemetery. And then shortly after the Second Vatican Council, it allowed that. Why? And for good reason. Because only God sees what's going on inside a person when they take their life. Not everyone who commits suicide is lost. So Saint Jean Vianney, the patron of confessors, was approached by a desperate woman, a mother of a son who had killed himself. And she said, I have no more reason to live. Why is God keeping me here? I think my son is in hell. Now, this was at the time when late, 1700s, when people were thinking that suicides are a straight ticket to hell. So she was convinced her son's in hell. And he told her, I will pray. When he saw her again, he said, your son was saved. God revealed it to him that from the moment he jumped to the moment he died, he converted, he repented for what he had done. You see, sometimes an act of suicide is impulsive. It's not always premeditated. It's not planned in advance. And there's a lot of duress that accompanies it, and therefore lack of deliberation, lack of premeditation. And therefore, God sees these mitigating factors that we don't see. So here in a case like this with, Jean Vianney, who lived from like the 1700s to the 1800s, was in a time when suicide was considered taboo completely. It still is, but we understand now that some people make mistakes even at the moment of death like that, and God can save that soul even at the moment of death with their repentance. Yeah.
And there's another one that I want to share with you just before we get to the end of this video. And I hope all of you have learned so much from this video so far. Try and listen to this.
Faustina, Jesus reveals to Saint Faustina, and this comes from the entry to her diary, 1749. Faustina exclaims, O my Creator and Lord, I see on all sides the trace of your hand and the seal of your mercy, which embraces all created things. O my most compassionate Creator, I want to give you worship on behalf of all created things and all inanimate creation. I call on the whole universe to glorify your mercy. Oh, how great is your goodness. I lost the other part of the passage here. Again, I'm pulling this up on the fly. Let me move ahead here and go back to this in a moment. To Blessed Edina Belanger, this is a passage that comes from her autobiography, page 343, June. It was published in 1928. Jesus tells Blessed Dina, the glory that my Father has received since the redemption is, in spite of human sinfulness, far greater than if humans had never sinned. Let me say that again. The glory that my Father has received since the redemption is, in spite of human sinfulness, far greater than if humans had never sinned, because the reparation that I offer my Father is infinite, and it makes up infinitely for all the sins of the human race. And each time a soul unites itself to me to glorify my Father, it gives him infinite glory through me. A book put out entitled The Spiritual Legacy of Sister Mary of the Holy Trinity. She was a Poor Clare nun in Jerusalem. Contains revelations of our Lord to her that has the Church's seal of approval. And in it, Jesus tells Sister Mary of the Holy Trinity, the soul that regrets her sin and makes reparation for it gives me a greater proof of love than a soul that has avoided sin. The soul that regrets her sin and makes reparation for it gives me a greater proof of love than a soul that has avoided sin.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, and hopefully all of you have learned so much from this video. And remember, if ever you have any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. And until the next one, thanks again for watching and may God bless you.